It has been a very eventful day here in Nigeria, of course, in these three states in particular, Bayelsa, Imo State, and Kogi State, mostly with the, once again, leadership recruitment process, off-cycle elections that have taken place the most of today. It has, of course, not come without its regular expected drama of Nigerian elections, of course, that nobody is surprised with. Welcome once again to the ballot. And of course, for the next 2 hours, we will be sharing with you the latest details and information concerning the off-cycle elections in these three states. I am Osarogie.
And I am Adebola Adediji. Just to mention, we'll have a correspondent, in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa State. They've been giving us updates already, and they're sure to keep us updated regarding elections, how it's panning out in those three states.
Absolutely. The big question, of course, that we have been asking since morning is what is different with regards to Nigeria's elections? Did we expect anything to be, slightly better with the way that the elections are carried out today? And are we surprised with anything that we've seen today? Will INEC also be able to prove itself to Nigerians that they, of course, have cleaned up their slate? Will they be able to also show Nigerians that they, of course, have fixed up the issues that they had in the past? And maybe fix the level of doubt and mistrust that Nigerians have with the electoral umpire? These are very important questions. Who will become governor of these three states, by tomorrow next, maybe?
Well, we'll just have to wait and find out. Talking about INEC, we've been hearing alleged reports regarding an INEC official in Bayelsa State kidnapped. And one of the reasons they mentioned was because of the lack of security operatives present at that particular point in time. Well, we'll, make confirmations. We're waiting for them to also make confirmations. We have our correspondents, right there. We'll be connecting with them pretty soon to get, the facts about that information.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's get into the conversation. We're going to kick off with, introducing the guests that we have. In studio, we have Dr. Dotun Adediji. He's a public affairs analyst. Good evening, and thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's Dotun.
Oh, Doku. Okay, I beg your pardon.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right. And via Zoom online, we have, of course, two people joining us. Mark Amaza, who's joining us. He's, of course, from YIAGA Africa. He's joining us from Abuja. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening.
Yes. And we also have George Anwayi, who is the Assistant Program Manager for TAF Africa, currently in Owerri in Imo State. Glad to have you join us. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's actually George Anwayi. Good afternoon, viewers. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Anwayi. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
All right.
Okay, let's just proceed with our conversation. So far, so good. How would you, assess, INEC in terms of their comportment and conduct of elections? So far, so good. And that question is for you, George.
Yeah, please take it again.
Okay, I was asking you to is it too early to score INEC? So far, elections have commenced, in some polling states across the three states for this off-cycle election. I was asking to know your rating for INEC so far in terms of the conduct of the election.
Okay, in Imo State here, we went around, of course, we have deployed observers in the field to observe the elections. Part of what we are actually observing is also the conduct of INEC in terms of the elections. And of course, TAF Africa is focused on disability inclusion and those aspects of the elections that has to do with the participation of persons with disabilities. I will say, based on our findings in terms of INEC conduct of the elections, because we have observers across the three states, Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi State. We have, in terms of arrival of INEC to the polling units, we have in Kogi State 94% of the 30 polling units we observe shows that INEC officials arrive early than 8:30 a.m. Designated for accreditation and voting to commence. And then in Imo State, we have 99% of the 30 polling units with registered persons with disabilities we observed. So INEC arrive in 99% of those polling units early. And when you talk about in Bayelsa State, they arrive at 77% of the polling units we observe before 8:30 a.m., which is early. And in Imo State, 58% of the polling units we observed commence accreditation and voting at 8:30 a.m. In Kogi State, 78% of the polling units we observed shows that voting commenced between 8:30 a.m. and 9 o'clock a.m. While in Bayelsa State, 54% of the polling units we observed shows that voting commenced between 8:30 a.m. and 9 o'clock a.m. So in terms of the early arrival of INEC, that's the figure we have. So fairly, we can say that INEC, came to some of the polling units early. And then when you talk about priority voting for persons with disabilities, out of the 90 observed deployed in 90 polling units with registered persons with disabilities across the 3 off-cycle states, it was reported by our observers that 80% of persons with disabilities were allowed to exercise their priority voting rights. In Kogi State, 75%, in Imo State, 67%, and in Bayelsa, 67%.
All right, let's just speak quickly to our in-house guest right here with us in the studio. I'm talking about Dr. Dotun Adediji. Now, it's a mixed bag, skirmishes here and there, a mixed pocket of violence in certain areas. We're hearing gunshots, unconfirmed, by the way, gunshots in Imo, a person, INEC official, kidnapped in Bayelsa State, in Kogi. We're hearing, different, pockets of violence here and there. What would be your reaction to these going forward in terms of curbing violence that has, sort of fraught electoral processes?
The challenge that we should look at is the fundamental nature of these things. I think it's because our politics is so monetized and the appurtenances of office are so high that people enjoy all kinds of privileges. Everyone wants to be there. I think our politics should be devoid of these things at the point in 2023, to the point that we should not be hearing about violence. Why should we? Why should we? The thing, you see, when I look at the electoral process, we are always keen on voting. What about the processes preceding and the processes within and processes thereafter? And also the fact that the politicians have too many things to enjoy beyond the reach of ordinary people. So they're always like clamoring to be there, and they can do anything to be there.
But when you say politics should be demonetized, if you could just expatiate, what do you mean by that?
No, what I mean is, I've been listening to you all day long. I've had people say vote buying, new techniques of vote buying, that is money. And then also the fact that people have so much money to throw around to buy ballots, to buy votes. Why should you? If you want to serve the people, why pay them to vote you in? And also the fact that, look at the National Assembly. The appropriation bill was just signed, and then almost every cycle, they are buying cars, they're giving them houses. Those things cause so much competition that people want to get, and then they want to be there. And what I mean by demonetization, removing all those appurtenances of power, that one person can have about 10 cars, like the speaker or maybe the president of the Senate can drive, and then with so many security people. Why do we need all that? I mean, those are the things that give them kind of position, then kind of they're different from the regular people. And then so they want to get there by all means, and when they get there, they don't want to leave. That's why you see the cycle of violence, and then they can get other people, minions, to fight on their behalf, to die on their behalf, whilst they enjoy all the privileges of power. I think we must look at when the parties were going to do their primaries. How can you buy a registration form for 100 million naira, for crying out loud? Which regular persons in politics can afford that kind of money, if not money that is dirty or money that is not got from regular sources? 100 million, and about 15 people will contest to get to one position. That's about, how much that is? Into billions. And so why should we, I know politics around the world has a bit of money in it, but there should be some restrictions. In America, for instance, you can't donate beyond so amount. Here, nobody knows how much anybody donates. Even if they say it, it's just saying, and nothing comes out of it. There's no consequences for the things that people do. And then so, honestly, I think we shouldn't take democracy as just being able to have elections, but we must take democracy as the totality of what happens in the democratic process, the registration, the cycle of election and all. What comes out of this after 4 years? We again another cycle of the same thing, the same. How would you in 2023 hear that the INEC person is kidnapped? And then the IG or police told us that they have so many men deployed for security purposes. So where's the security? If they can see abduct an INEC officer. So look, there's too much of putting on shows with nothing to show for it thereafter.
Mr. Adediji, we're going to come back to you. Let's go to YIAGA Africa's Senior Communications Officer, Mark Amaza. I want to ask you, and of course, I'm taking off from where Dr. Adediji has just left off. The whole idea, that INEC officials could be kidnapped, and we're hearing about, violence in one part of the country or the other. We're hearing about resort shoots that have already been filed, being discovered by INEC. It's embarrassing. But can we say that these are really just signs of the deplorable state or the sad state of our leadership recruitment process? And how INEC itself, regardless of how there's been a new electoral act, still has these loopholes here and there. Can we say that's the picture? Or is it safer to say that Nigeria as a whole, the dysfunctionality that defines Nigeria as a whole, is what trickles down to every single thing that we do, and that includes our elections? So no matter what you expect from the promises that INEC has made, Nigeria will happen to our electoral process. Is that what we probably would see here?
So I'm inclined to go with the second one in terms of the dysfunctionality of Nigeria trickling down everywhere. But I also don't agree that it means no matter what. I think this can be checked if we make an intention to do so. So for example, in the case of pre-filled result sheets, those people who were behind it need to be found and punished. Whether they are INEC officials, whether they are in concert with politicians, they need to be found and punished. Those are what will send strong messages to people that will now stop them from doing so. I do not believe that Nigerians are such a unique people in terms of being difficult in regard compared to any other people around the world. But the difference is here, there's not a lot of consequence for bad behavior. And when that doesn't happen, when there's no consequence for bad behavior, it only entrenches that behavior until it becomes almost like culture. And that's what we're seeing in our elections, as the way we're seeing also in other facets of society. So there's a need to make examples of those who are behind those pre-filled election sheets. There's a need to strengthen our security infrastructure. We raised alarm for Imo at least that there was a lot of insecurity. And it wasn't just Imo, also for Bayelsa and Kogi. And we haven't seen, and there's this with internal security issues as things that we grapple with for a long period. But regardless of leadership selection, if those persons who are behind it, look, I'm not making a holding brief for INEC here, but I also understand how it's tough to be personally responsible, whether you're the INEC chair or whatever leadership you are, for thousands of persons who are in your employ, especially those who are ad hoc staff, and they're not even full-time employees. But when people behave contrary to the law or break the law and they're not punished, it sends a message that you can get away with this. And that's why these things keep happening again and again.
Well, really, really fair point there, and I think I probably would support your point, with regards, you can make examples of these persons that break the law, individually, instead of just blaming the whole country. Because I remember when Dora Akunyili was head of NAFDAC, she basically showed that you can actually get it right. With one ministry, with one department, with one agency in Nigeria, you can actually get it right if you're serious enough. So maybe, INEC needs to borrow a leaf and, handle things the way that the late Dora Akunyili didn't have that.
Yeah,
back then.
so
I don't
well,
know.
if I also come in there, so one of the reasons we also understand that INEC itself is overburdened with managing this whole electoral process, regulating parties, even trying maybe not taking the lead on electoral offenses, but supporting it. And that's one of the reasons why there's been a push for the establishment of an electoral offenses commission that will prosecute offenders. Unfortunately, that bill, why it passed the House of the Senate in the last in the Ninth Assembly, didn't pass at the House of Representatives, which means it has to be reintroduced. But there's a need to take that burden off INEC and also to have a lead agency that deals with those issues. Not the police also, because they also, we also have a police structure that unfortunately hasn't worked out perfectly for us or optimally for us. But there's a need to really prioritize how we deal with electoral offenses, from those who carry out the offenses and to those who benefit from those offenses. The polling unit officers in the places we have flagged in Kogi State who brought in those pre-filled election results are not the beneficiaries of that. So who are the beneficiaries? Unless it's proven that they are not, it's being done without their knowledge. Up the food chain, all those people need to be punished. And until those things begin to send a strong message, a strong message will not be sent to future offenders.
Okay, let me quickly touch a bit on the report. Unconfirmed, by the way, alleged report regarding the updates in Imo State where some unknown men carted away result from an INEC official. And then when you juxtapose that against what the DIG of police in Imo State, Frank Umba, says, having promised that 6,000 security operatives were deployed in Imo State to ensure smooth sailing election, it leaves much to be desired. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's quite disappointing that this incident still happened, considering the fact that this is not a general election. This is an election in just 3 states. And we should have enough manpower to be able to adequately ensure that law and order is maintained in 3 states. And I mean, the landmass of Imo is one of the least, one of the smallest states regarding in the lower half or lower third in terms of landmass. So it's not just a large area that's so difficult to manage, So it's really disappointing that despite the assurances of the police and the planning that's been done, that these incidents still happen.
Okay, seems we lost connection to our guest there, but let's see if we can take a guest who is virtually. I'm talking about Mr. Mark Amaza.
We just lost Mark Amaza. George Anwayi, if you can still hear us, we'd like you to take on the conversation on Imo State, and you did break down the voting numbers with regards, or rather the statistics with regards persons with disabilities, and how basically I mean, I think we've had a pretty good run today. You scored at about 80% success with regards to people living with disabilities in Imo State. But I want you to speak with regards, the elections generally in Imo State for today. Would you say that it has been, reasonably fair? You may not give them, 100% pass mark, but at least it's been fair enough compared to what you expected.
Okay, generally, when it comes to the conduct of elections in Imo State, from our observation, I can say it's fair. Just that the turnout from some of the polling units we went to observe, to see things for ourselves, the turnout is very low. I mean, voter apathy is apparent. I mean, a particular polling unit we went to that has a lot of registered voters. We only recorded 2 persons who came to vote at those polling units. As a matter of fact, the old stadium, which is a hub for quite a number of polling units, and we expect to see a bit of activities in terms of voters turnout. We just saw very scanty. I mean, the number of people that turn out to vote are very few. In some places we see people, playing football, very close to polling units and paying no attention whatsoever in terms of coming out to vote. So for me, from my own observation, it's fairly good. INEC arrived polling units in most of the polling units on time. And the only thing is that there are no people around to actually come out and vote. So they're just sitting, waiting for people to come, and in most of the polling units, they have even concluded voting. And of course, the ballot has been counted and they have closed.
All right, let's come to our in-studio guest, Dr. Dotun. What would you say so far about the participation of voters in the turnout of the election? I mean, so far as we have proceeded in the course of the day.
In watching your station all day and following the proceedings, I found that not too many people, it was scanty, the participation of people in the electoral process. Not too many people were energized to come. Those who want to come, they said, oh, because they had gunshots and then there were kind of violence here and there, they stayed away. The thing for me is this. We need to look at our processes very well. INEC may come early. If people don't come, then it makes a mockery of INEC coming early. And if people don't come, do we sit down to review the reasons why people don't show up? People came the last one and nothing happened. And just as I think Mark said, there are no consequences. The gentleman in Adamawa, with the electoral commission or whatever it was, who manipulated the election and then was charged, nothing has happened. And then when it takes a long time for judicial processes to take its consequences, and then people just think we can do it. How can it be that the same thing that happened before, and then you want people to come and vote and put their lives in jeopardy? It will be difficult. So the thing is, we need to really sit down and understand, what do we want as a people? Do we want a democracy that works? And do we want to work for that kind of democracy? Do we want to encourage people to believe in the democracy? If police say to you, oh, security is there, not to worry, and then you find that even the INEC official is abducted, even the policeman stands there, and then people can come in with already filled in ballot papers, and then you want me to come and sit down from morning till night and vote, it will be difficult. And so people don't find a reason to come, even when they vote and they claim that the vote counts. What happens about the process thereafter? And then you want me that is hungry to come and sit down and then waste my time to vote?
Yeah, it's a painful thing, you know.
It is.
Dr. Adediji and Mark Amaza, I will have you both, because I know YIAGA Africa has, been following up on, situations like this and has, always tried to encourage more Nigerians to be a part of the process. But you can't argue, you can't say that you don't understand why the next elections that we, carry out in Nigeria might have worse voter turnout than we've ever experienced. Because, I don't know that anybody currently can still be convinced to, do and fight as hard as people fought in 2023, February 25th, with the registration, we're getting involved with the process. How does INEC convince anybody to come out to vote again in the future? Mark, we'll have you respond to that, and then we have someone else we're going to be introducing in a bit.
Yeah, so that is a very good question. And yes, we are not oblivious of the reasons why we are seeing this low voter turnout. And that's why for us, we have been saying it's very critical that INEC does a good job, a credible job of these elections to begin to restore the confidence of citizens in elections. The biggest confidence for citizens in elections is the credibility of the elections. The next biggest thing is those governments that have been elected delivering on good governance, which will reassure people on the importance of voting. And that's, if we do not get it right with these elections and also subsequent elections, it will only get worse. It will become more and more difficult. We understand how difficult it is a job for us convincing people to come out and vote. Despite all of the setbacks, we still believe it's important for people to come out and vote and participate, because our democracy can will only get worse if we do not participate. And this is, but then at the same time, INEC needs to ensure that they do their job, get and do elections well, credible, free and fair, so that people can see that, things can see that and begin to participate and have their confidence restored in this process.
All right, let's take quickly the perspective of our guest who is on Skype. I'm talking about Femi Adebayo, the Senior Program Manager, Kimpact Development Initiative in, right there in Kogi State. Glad to have you join us, Mr. Adebayo.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, fantastic. Let me have your thoughts so far regarding how elections are panning out across the 3 states, Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa State. What is your thought on that?
Okay, I think straight off to the election day processes and procedure, it is very important to look at it because I know there's been a lot of emphasis on turnout from the conversation I was hearing, the guests in the studio and those that are joining virtually. If you look at it across the 3 states, I think Imo, from data trickling into the data room for us at KDI, Imo State is abysmally low. And that is why you see the narrative out there. People were talking about Kogi having, good turnout. But I think that is just in comparison with Imo State. But on a normal day, if you're looking at it holistically from the registered voter in a place like Kogi State, and you're looking at it from PVC collected, and it's also good to understand that none of the states has less than 95% of PVC collection. So, and the list of the registered voter, that should be in Bayelsa State, barely above 1 million. So, and if you look at that, it's something, of course, we are still waiting for the official announcement or release of figures to be able to determine exactly what the turnout looks like. But, from pillars and the data trickling in, it's not going to be different from the trend of general election and even off-cycle elections where there are, downward trend of low turnout. And if I'm going to contribute to some of the thoughts flying, as part of the conversation, why do we have low turnout? Why is turnout not that impressive in elections, right? There are a lot of thoughts that gone ahead as regards the lack of confidence in the electoral process. And I think the most question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do people vote, right? What is the character or the behavior of a voter in Nigeria? I think just to add to what every other person has mentioned is the fact that it's very difficult when people are not seeing the dividend of their vote, of their vote, or voting for a particular individual or a politician or a candidate who rule them, make policies, make decisions for 4 years. And it is difficult, right, to even talk about economic development. It is difficult to talk about even in terms of human rights. And that is why we will even be talking about the old democracy as a whole. We just need to talk about that in the real sense, because when people cannot see the dividend of what democracy is, it becomes difficult. Even for the Electoral Commission, it becomes difficult to even sensitize or even vote, to tell people to vote. Now, if you now bring it and, of course, flip the conversation to talk about what KDI is doing, which is on electoral security, you look at it, why do we continue to also have violence in the election? It is still the same. When you have a lot of, when you have young people, high number of youth unemployment, even the number of unemployed people in Nigeria can make a country in some West African countries, right? Then it becomes difficult to convince them to say, or what we are practicing is what it's worth it. Or coming out to stay from morning till night to vote, worth it. So that is one aspect as regards, having the dividend of democracy. And of course, we can't rule out the fact, and I think one of the guests in the studio did mention that, as regards the fact that there are so many individuals after the 2023 general elections that have the perception that elections in the country is not what they want it to look like, is not what they want it to be. So then it comes to question the aspect of public confidence in the process, which I think that has been tackled a lot from the guests in the studio. And also we need to look at the process in itself. Are we simplifying the process enough? We're coming to an age where people want everything to be fast. But look at it. Let's look at it. We have so many stages in the electoral process. You go out to queue to register, CVR, as it's being called, continuous voter registration. You register, then you go back to collect PVC. That is another layer, and you see a reduction. Of course, in the three states having elections today, you see that about 4%, some in Bayelsa 6%, has been cut off because they couldn't get their PVC for one reason or the other. That's a percentage minus for people that are eligible to vote in that state. Then you come after that, you come to the point of the election day where you need to also stand and queue for accreditation. That is another bridge to cross. Not so many people also have the mindset or have the patience, to come and queue and talk about accreditation. When you talk about accreditation, there's a reduction from PVC collection to accreditation, obviously. And from that, you also talk about the aspect what do you call it? The invalid vote, valid and invalid vote. And if you look at it, in all of the elections, off-cycle elections, in previous off-cycle elections, and the general elections, there has been increase in terms of the trend of invalid vote. That is one of the things, and that is one of the ways that you see that the number of persons that are voting, or the percentage counted for voting, right? Of course, I know for turnout, we look at total vote cast, not valid vote. But one of the things that is very important is this, and that is what I'm trying to say. When people cannot see the dividend, or they cannot even lay claim and match what they are doing in terms of democracy or election with what they experience, and then it becomes a problem.
You know, if I may just quickly, cut in there. But before I get to my question to you, just to reference one of our guests who will be leaving us, and that is Mark Amaza, Senior Communication Officer for YIAGA Africa. Thank you so much for your time on the program. Okay, back to you. I have a question for you. You talked about how cumbersome our electoral process is. I wanted to find out from you, just to know from you, how then can we simplify our process, of election to make more people participate in terms of voting?
So honestly, I think very, very good question, important conversation we need to have going forward. One of the things that we're tracking, and we've been doing that since the Osun elections and up to this current election that is ongoing, like underway right now, is the fact that, do we truly need PVC to vote? Because when you register as a voter, and I have this conversation with colleagues a number of times, and the question, or my point of argument remains, do you have a BVN card? Everybody have their BVN, the number, and if you're asked for it, you shun it out, you tell the person, this is my BVN. Then eventually, we all know that the PVC has VIN number. The moment you're registered as a registered voter in Nigeria, everybody should be given their VIN number. The process of queuing to collect PVC, and it's a matter of policy that if you don't have PVC, if Beavers does not act, if you don't show your PVC, so that Beavers or the presiding officer in charge of Beavers will be able, to use the Beavers on you, accredit you, and facials and fingerprint. But look at it. If you can check your number, because every of the registered voter will be pasted at the polling unit, right? For people to check if this is the polling unit they belong to. If you can find your name and your number on that particular list, then it's so okay that we have Beavers using your fingerprints or facials. I believe that in terms of biometrics technology, I still personally believe, I believe that fingerprints and facials are a very good way of, authenticating users or authenticating individuals. And I think that is enough. For me, having PVC as part of the process is more like we are also rendering Beavers useless. Not minding, or of course, minding the fact that when it comes to even transmitting election results, Beavers is not having so much role in that regard, because the court has made us understood that it is not compulsory to even move to high rep. And that is another function, aside from accreditation, that's another function of Beavers that we know. So if that is the case, if we also have PVC after Beavers has been introduced and we still retain PVC, then I think it's complete. We're having so many things to do that is serving the same purpose, so many processes, so many stages, serving the same purposes, and at the end of the day, it weary people down, and that's the first aspect. Then the second aspect, which I will mention on how we could demystify all of this cumbersomeness in our electoral process, is just as we have introduction of technology, we need to introduce more of technology in the electoral process. While I understand that we are also, of course, I am not saying internet voting when I talk about technology, but I think we need to do more as regards electronic voting, introducing all of this process, right? It's very important because an average Nigerian also have a smartphone. Even I tell people jokingly, my grandma is on Facebook, right? A woman of about 80-something years on Facebook. So if you look at that, people are gradually moving towards that area. Then if you look at the registered voter, the disaggregation, in most of the states, for instance, in Imo State, you have about about 54% of the registered voter to be young people. Then you have another 30-something% to be middle age. That is people that have not yet left the age of 45, the bracket of 45. And these are individuals that also are abreast with electoral technology rather. So if we introduce technology in all of this process, it will be easy. Not necessarily mean in terms of voting, which I know the Electoral Act has provision for that, but I'm talking about some other processes. Yeah. Is it possible? Is it possible for us in terms of registration and all, in terms of registration for us to introduce this process more and more beyond what is being done in the CVR process?
I'm sure it's not impossible. It would just take a lot of, policies and, amendments, and approvals by the National Assembly and by the President. And, how long these things take. That's an average, what I've just described as a 10-year process at least.
Provisions for electoral technology. And having this conversation, right, it's also important to state that even the Electoral Act was not really specific in terms of technology that could be introduced. It was just a broad conversation or provision in the Electoral Act.
So kindly hold on, Mr. Adebayo. I think everyone agrees that there should be more adjustments or more amendments even to the Act, at least to make some part of it, compulsory or mandatory. It just takes so long, with the way that Nigeria functions. Let's quickly get to our correspondent, Bettina Anwayi, who is joining us, of course, to share with us live feed from her polling location. Hi, Bettina. Go ahead. Tell us what's going on over there.
All right, I'm currently at Prouder Primary School in Lokoja. Now, this is supposed to be the Ward A rack center where all Ward A polling units bring their results to after they have finished all the counting. A lot has been happening in Kogi State, and I can tell you that voters' turnout was a bit low in Kogi State, even though we know that they don't have so much of a population. But I personally had expected to see more people outside coming to cast their votes, but for reasons best known to them, not a lot of people came out. However, those that did come out made sure that they waited up until the point where all the counting was done, because they were very adamant and wanted to be sure that no hanky-panky was played in between counting of the result. Party agents too were on top of their toes, fighting for their votes and making sure that even the ones that other party agents were trying to make look like it was invalid, they stood their grounds and everything was sorted amicably. However, earlier in the day, I got information that somewhere in Kogi State called Akpan, a fake youth copper was shot by the Nigerian army. Now, this is because this person was not a youth corper, but was putting on the youth corper uniform and tried to take a ballot. I also heard that in this same Kogi State, I have valid information that at Igala Mela, a local government chairman was also caught with arms and a lot of cash. I believe that the Nigerian army are still sorting that out. But apart from that, so far so good. It's been a pretty good outing.
All right, Bettina, you talked about, a core member, being shot and all of that. What then is the presence of security operatives like in Kogi State?
It's very huge. For every junction you go to, there are barricades. And I was telling someone earlier on air that in Kogi State, where I am, unlike the usual where we see the policemen manning the streets, this time the Nigerian army were the ones manning the streets, and they took their jobs pretty seriously. It even got to a point where they were trying to verify some vehicles who couldn't identify themselves, and they stopped us for almost 2 hours. All journalists were stopped, no movement on that road until they were able to verify where those vehicles were coming from and where they were going to. So they took their jobs pretty seriously, and the security presence has been huge here in Kogi State.
All right.
In terms of proceedings of election, INEC says elections will start by 8:30 a.m. and then come to a close at 2:30 p.m. But then they mentioned if you happen to be on the queue as at 2:30 p.m., yes, definitely you will still cast your vote. So how has proceedings been like in Kogi State? Did they start in time? Did they keep to the procedure given by INEC in terms of how things should flow?
Yes, they did start on time, and they, however, happened to finish on time because, like I told you, low voters turnout, so there was no reason to stay longer in most polling units. However, the ones who exceeded 2 o'clock but were already on the queue were given the chance to cast their vote regardless of the time because they were there earlier than 2 p.m.
All right. Well, I mean, it's 5 p.m. already. Does it feel like they're going to be wrapping up voting in that polling unit anytime soon?
Most polling units have already wrapped up. Like I said, this is the rack center where the polling units bring their results to. So you can see the huge turnout. So you know that almost all the polling units are already here waiting for the collation to take place in this place.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. And we're hoping that, from now on, the process, of course, remains smooth, until results are eventually declared in Kogi State. It seems like, everyone kept to time. Which is something we should commend INEC for, at least, even instead of, castigating them.
I agree with you, Osarogie. I think they should be commended because after the last general elections, the best they can do is to try to redeem themselves, and I see that happening.
All right, we'll see. Bettina, we'll connect with you again. Let's see if, this would redeem INEC's image enough. We'll speak with you again. Right. Thanks for joining us. Okay.
Stay safe.
Okay. I'm going to call George Anwayi in, and right after that, I would like Dr. Adediji to also speak. The question, of course, is on redeeming INEC's image, just like I just mentioned. Do you think that, these off-cycle elections, the way that they are carried out, will be enough to redeem the image of, INEC? No, let's start with George Anwayi.
To be honest with you, INEC will really do a lot to be able to regain that confidence of the electorate. Because from the last election, a lot have happened. And of course, from what we see in Imo State here, the voter apathy, the low turnout of voters actually speaks volume. Because of course, during the presidential elections, it was clear people came out in mass to vote. The particular polling units I talk about, that's the old stadium. It was filled up with voters who turned out during the presidential elections to come out and vote. But today, what we observed was really a scanty, very, very small number of people who came out to vote. So INEC will really have to do more than just arriving at polling units on time for them to really regain the confidence, of the electorate. I think
a little struggle with the connection there. But like you said, INEC would have to do more than just coming or showing up on time. Punctuality is not the only issue that INEC has. Dr. Adediji, do you agree?
Absolutely. My own assessment, I don't want to be like a wet blanket. Honestly, I'm not impressed. Showing up on time for what? In an election in 2023, and then we count that as a positive for them. Look, honestly, we need to go beyond this snail speed approach that we're put into election. I listened to Adebola. What stops us as a nation in 2023 to do 1/10 of what he has mentioned? Nothing. There's no political will because the people there enjoy the docility of the people. The way things are, it makes them feel so relevant to the system so they can do whatever they choose. You say National Assembly they will not pass any bill to change the system because it will change the status quo of how they get in there. These are people that ought not to even be in National Assembly. If you listen and watch what they do there, then you want people to then go and vote for those kind of people. Many of them get there not because they can do anything, but because of the power of money that I mentioned in the first place. Honestly, I think, the area I start from is this. I look at Waze. Waze is dead now. There was a panel that was set up by Waze that was electoral. The only president that ever owned up in this country that electoral process has been poor was Yar'Adua. And immediately, he said it himself. How many of them have been able to say it? They couldn't because they benefited. So he did set up that. And then there was this electoral reform that were put forward. Until a few days ago, they were taking bits and bits out of it. Nobody visited it. And that's why we're still in the same cycle of congratulating INEC for coming early. INEC has become like a behemoth that he sits down there and wants to control every part of the electoral process. You can't work like that. You can't work in a silo. Liberia is about 5 million population. They had elections about 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And we're still sitting here and we are making noise that we're arriving early. Honestly, we need to get serious as the people in this. It beats me when we congratulate INEC for little things, logistics. And then we say, oh, they have done well what in 2023? Look, honestly, if we don't get hard on ourselves and put the feet of these people to fire, we'll just be every 4 years be ritualistic. Oh, let's go and vote. And then after a while, it will be so clear to us that only 10 people will come to vote. People come to vote, they see policeman there who sees people carrying a wheelbarrow, and then he runs and then he sits down there. He says, I don't have a... I listened to Mba, I think it was on your TV yesterday, and he said, oh, we are going to show them that nobody can do it. They've done it again. I think in January or February that we voted, some people were caught with raw cash.
Yeah.
And what happened? What has happened? When the judicial process is so slow, you said, oh, a commission, INEC itself is not serious. Yeah, they can dance around technology. We introduce this. What is the result of what you have introduced? That is the thing. In this country, we don't review for result. How many corporate bodies can have somebody like that man as head of business, and then you are doing it, and then they say, don't worry, we'll wait for the next cycle. They'll sack him. No consequences. Everybody does what they like, and then we pamper them, or you've done well too. Jega's time was better. We had some result, limited reforms he had, and he worked with it. Why are we not continuing and changing this process? As the Adediji said, why do we need to get PVC? Why do we need many people, let me tell you, many people get PVC because government may ask for it when you want to go and register yourself in hospital or schools. That's why people get, not because they want to vote. The politicians think the dividend of democracy is when they give you rice and give you tomato. That's not dividend democracy. And I've also said it. If a nation cannot wake up with light, out of 24 hours, we cannot have light for 22. We don't have water. Most people have boreholes. You pave the road to your area. You create your local government in your own self. And then you say you have a nation, you want to go and vote. When you can create the benefits that the government ought to give you yourself, why should I be mandated to go and vote? I'll do it ritualistic. Because let me give you as this an example. We voted, some of us voted for some people say, oh, this is a new process in this electoral process. All of them are collecting the jeep. Whether in so what is the difference between the regular people and the opposition? Nothing. So you want me next 4 years again to go and stand up to vote for somebody who gets there and then looks at his own pocket and looks at the money he gets and he walks away. Yeah. And you call it dividend of democracy. Excuse me.
That's pretty heartbreaking, but of course, those are some of the realities of, being a Nigerian.
Yeah.
Let's go back now to Mr. Adebayo. I would like that you also quickly speak on that. I did see an interview yesterday, I believe, where the analyst was saying that INEC would need at least 2 election cycles to redeem whatever image it's had, after the 2023 elections. Do you think that in any way, shape, or form, that is going to be possible for INEC?
Yeah, so I've been listening to the conversation, and I think much importantly, we need to take accountability of electoral administration very important in this country on so many fronts, from the legal perspective, from even the citizen, and of course from the electoral management body itself. Let me start from the legal perspective, where we need to take this very seriously. You remember that, of course, the case is not sub judice again, so I can talk about it, which is the presidential election petition, post-election litigation, the process. One of the major highlights of that particular pre-election litigation is the Beavers and High Rev. If you look at that, the Electoral Act actually gave a discretionary provision that INEC should decide what exactly they were going to do when it comes to transmitting or transfer of result, right? But where do you get the INEC discretion? Where do you get their own thought? It's from the, what they call it, the guideline, the INEC guideline, But the paragraph 38 or 28 of that guideline was talking about the fact that moving, beavers to high rev, it was part of the provision. Of course, I also know there is manual collation of the process and the likes there. But now, if you go back to 134.2 of the Electoral Act, it's also saying that if INEC do not even obey its own rules and regulations, it's not enough ground to approach the court. But very many of us, we know about the grant of petition, which is also in section 134, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act, that talks about the aspect of lack of majority vote cast, not qualified to contest, and of course, corrupt practices, right, in the process. So these are some of the things we see. You see contradictory position of the the legal framework in these regards. Some ambiguous provision in the Electoral Act that is not expressly stated. Then it is subjected to different interpretation. The politician are interpreting, even INEC is interpreting differently. The citizen are also interpreting differently. So these are some of the challenges in that regard. And it hampers holding even the electoral management body accountable. Because at the end of the day, they come with the excuse that that is the legal framework. Right. Now let's talk about the citizens, or let me talk about the electoral management body in itself. I also completely agree with the fact that it will take INEC more than even 2 election cycles to clear some of these things. Don't forget that it's not just starting from 2023. It has started from the days of Professor, in 2003, 2007. These are days where election is still going on in a state like Ondo State. A result has been announced in Abuja, and people were still voting in Ondo State. So these are some of the things that have happened. And people Nigerians are people. Nigerians are not dummy. They also have understanding, and of course, going back to history, they know some of these things. And don't forget that Nigerians don't forget that they're ugly. They don't forget easily. So when you look at all of this, the records, the antecedents of the electoral management body, even when it is changing the leadership and the management per time, but the institution still remains. So and if you look at it, people, just like the prof or the doctor in the studio did mention, that the 2015 days were better. But if you look at it, Nigerians or people don't even want to look at that, because looking at 2019, 2023, it seems we are retrogressing. So if you ask me, I think INEC need to do more, most especially proactive communication. Yeah. For instance, there have been a lot of conversation in Kogi State of irregularities around pre-filled election results, missing election results in some local government, like Ogorima Gongo local government in Kogi State here. But if you look at it, maybe in the last 4-5 hours, INEC released a statement as regards their investigating. That is generic. That is generic. Why not being, after then we've been tracking to see if there's any of that update. There's a need to manage, to do communication better in these regards. Be specific, in as much, of course, it's also begged for the question that, is INEC complicit in all of this? Is any of their staff complicit in all of this? So these are conversations we need to have. But if at the end of the day, they're giving rooms, right, to fill in the blank check, then it becomes a problem. All right. And I think I mentioned the last point, which is the...
Yeah, I want us to quickly just go to bring in George Anwayi. I know he also has something to say with regards to this, and also to speak on the role. I mean, we have a new government in office currently. Elections took place in February. Tribunal has passed, and of course now we have the President Ballot administration. What role do you think that they also need to play if we need to fine-tune and clean up our leadership recruitment process? Bear in mind, that people would argue that a lot of these things aren't fixed because they help, some of these politicians stay in office. So that's why it may never, ever be fixed. But what do you expect from President Tinubu now that, of course, he's in office?
Okay.
George, can you hear us?
Okay, so, well, we have a new government, we have a new sheriff in town, which is very important for us to acknowledge that. But for me...
Hold on, Mr. Adebola, hold on. I was trying to direct that question to George Anwayi. I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, I think we have okay, you can go ahead. I think we have a connection problem with George. Go ahead, Mr. Adebola.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, of course, it's very important for us to acknowledge that. And I think, just like one of the guests mentioned, that late President Yar'Adua did acknowledge that the election that brought me to power was flawed. And of course, he set up the reform committee, the panel, which is a Uwe's committee, and they came up with fantastic, recommendations. But I think I'm expecting a very good body language as regards, number one, when it comes to elections, since we are in the election season now, to talk about electoral reforms. Because one of the things that is very, very important, and we need to start having conversation around it, is the setting up, or of course, going through the House of Parliament, passing through the, the National Assembly, is the Electoral Offence Commission. Because as it is now, one of the things that is affecting the process, one of the major things affecting the process is electoral insecurity. I heard one of your reporter did mention of the killing in Ampa local government about the fake member. We got that in the data room for us at KDI. We also heard and we confirmed the report of 2 individuals trying to snatch ballot box in the Kina local government, and the military shot them too. So right now, as we're speaking, we have about three different, fatality in Kogi State. So what am I trying to say is that it is now time, and of course, it doesn't end up in electoral violence. There are other electoral offenses. So I'm expecting a lot of reforms when it comes to this. And don't forget that the question of legitimacy is also looming, right? Around the electoral process for the 2023. One of the things that is very important is just for the president to restore confidence in Nigeria, and of course I think 8 million individuals that voted for him, and those that didn't even vote, I'm talking about the other 7 to 6 million plus, that's about 30 million individuals that didn't even vote for him, that vote for their other candidate, which is the candidate of their choice. Of course, we are all Nigerians. Elections are over, pre-election litigation are over, Supreme Court has given judgment. It's also important to improve the standard of living. Because in all of this, what is very important, and why we are talking, and we are raising, we are talking emotionally about elections, is because when it comes to the standard of living, it's difficult. When you're talking about the economy and the economic landscape as a whole, it poses some difficulties. Ease of doing business is not there. When you talk about FX, is a different conversation entirely. So I think these are some of the things that the president needs to take care of, because that is very key and very important. So that we don't come back in 2026. And of course, we also have elections next year in Edo and Ondo, and we're talking about the same thing again.
Well, Edo State and Ondo State, I think the Edo State election definitely would be one big one to watch out for. I mean, with all the things that have happened in the build-up. Let's quickly have George Anwayi also quickly share your response to what the Tinubu administration should do quickly, because I know you need to also step out. What would you expect from the Tinubu administration if they have any interest in fixing our leadership recruitment process?
Yes, it's important that the current president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also, get to work in terms of reforms. Because the truth is that we need our system to be less cumbersome and less ambiguous, even in terms of the provision of the law. Of course, there was an argument about the transmission of the results, through the beavers to the IRF, and a lot of back and forth, and then had to go to court, and even in the court, a lot of. So we need these things to really be simple. My concern is persons with disabilities, which is our own constituency. If the system is cumbersome, if the process are less cumbersome, it makes participation of persons with disabilities easier. But when things are complicated and very ambiguous, it creates room for voter apathy, and make people feel like they are being overstressed in trying to participate, and of course, in trying to also exercise their civic rights. So it's important that the president also work in the area of reforms of the electoral processes, and then of course looking at also the provision of the law. I think that it's important that the laws are less ambiguous, so that it's clear. I mean, without any need to go to court, to get some interpretations. When elections are are conducted.
Okay, let's just quickly take the perspective of our in-studio guest, and that's Dr. Adediji. Now, to another salient point, INEC, of course, they are the midwife of this election. And one very important point they have referenced is VIPs. I mean, VIPs, their use of security personnel in the process of them going to, cast their vote in a manner, well managed so as not to intimidate voters on ground there, in the polling units. What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Adediji?
Just before that, we would like to say bye also to George Anwayi. I know you also need to attend to other issues concerning the election. But thank you very much for joining us. And of course, we hope that we continue to expand the conversation on persons living with disabilities in Nigeria and across the continent. And they get the recognition that they deserve in our societies. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
To respond to your question, in this country, there are laws for the poor and laws for the VIP. Because of that, people do anything with impunity and get away with it. I was watching the TV. I saw one governor coming with a retinue of security guards, which yesterday the IG or the DIG said that would not be permitted and that they will not be allowed to vote. They voted. So what stops next person to do this? Do you think, I don't know whether you just heard it on CNN, the telephone and the iPad of Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, was seized by FBI agents. That can't happen in Nigeria. That can't. You see, for as long as there is, you see, all these things we talk about ambiguity in the law, it is not accidental. I can tell you that. You think they don't know, but the thing that is, when it leaves room to multiple interpretation, then anybody can take what he chooses. And that is what is happening. INEC says, no, we don't want this. They still do it. So what happens? No consequences. For as long in this country that you can get away with anything, with blue murder. And that's why there is self-help in everything. The landlord does not report his tenant, he ejects and then removes the ceiling and everything. Nothing happens. Because he knows that going to the court, they can be there for 6 years and the guy will not pay a dime for 6 years. For as long as we permit all these imperfections knowingly and deliberately, we will not. For me, what I think should happen in this country, there should be something called a class suicide. Somebody comes in who has been part of this mess and morass, and then he says, enough is enough. Without that, nothing will happen.
I mean, Dr. Adediji, you referenced Western countries. I'm just racking my brains here. What is it about their processes that makes it transparent, seamless, free, and fair? Probably we can learn from, I mean, African countries can learn from moving forward in terms of conducting elections.
But truly, do you think we don't know? We know, but we not want to do it because it doesn't pay the system we run. The people in government, look, if the moment somebody goes to Abuja as House of Rep man or Senate, he never wants to come back to either Ikeja or Ibadan. He wants to stay there and he begins to manipulate the processes that he keeps him there. For as long as that is allowed, you know, the thing that is also wrong with all this, we don't have a sense of legacy. We don't even know what the dynastic something means. And to leave a name, like we can talk about Olowo and Zik and Sardauna, people don't care anymore because values don't matter. As long as you are rich and you can bamboozle your way through anything, is all. What should be happening now? Somebody should be sitting there. Is this a perfect system that we have? Even if we're not going to have a perfect system, can we sit down and juggle it around and do something? But no, because it suits them. It allows. If you look at Lagos, look at Lagos, look at the many young people sitting around. Go to Agege. You see people at 9 o'clock drinking and shacking up. They're in their 20s to 30s. Who cares? The only thing we want them for is to use them as political thugs, and then we don't bring our own children. How many politicians bring their children to campaign? They don't. They bring all these boys to come and campaign. They can die, but their own children can come back and come to House of Rep. For as long, don't you know how many people in House of Rep who belong to political dynasty? For as long as those things happen, we're not going to change this system. But I'm praying that one day somebody among the same political class will commit class suicide and say, no, enough is enough. Because the danger is this. It's just like what is happening in Amaza and Palestine. The thing is, if you don't correct an injustice, the injustice perpetuates a cycle of violence that will continue and continue and they will be perpetuated.
Yeah.
We can do the change if we choose to. There's no political will, I can say.
Yeah. I also want you to answer the why bother question. I'm also going to bring in Mr. Adebayo on this one. The why bother question for me is centered around something that I spoke about in the morning, and that is what exactly are the things that engineer the voting decisions of the average Nigerian? What are the reasons we vote? You know, what are the things that make us decide between one candidate or the other? Because to a large extent, it's really just one party or the other party. It's not because, I mean, for the longest time, we've never really had politicians that inspire us and let us know the reasons we're actually going to vote, because we have hope. It's really just it's either this party or this party. This party has, disappointed us once again, so we're going to choose the next party. So we first of all would try to understand, why do Nigerians vote? What is the thing that inspires the Nigerian to go through that whole process to vote? That's one. And then two is, I'm going to start with Dr. Adediji, and then I'll bring Mr. Adebayo on this one. And then the second question, in why bother is, if we've never really seen that elections have fixed our lives, we've never really seen that through one electoral cycle, things improved, either in healthcare or in security or in education, infrastructure, the economy, then do we continue to re-engineer the why bother yourself question amongst Nigerians?
I like to travel back in time to one politician in Ekiti, one governor of Fayoshe, who called his stomach infrastructure. The politicians have come to understand that what matters to Nigeria is the now mentality. Let me just be able to get this now. There's no thinking of futuristic implications of what they're doing. And so the man is very hungry. That is why the politicians like the perpetuation of penury. So that when you're so poor, you can't think. The only thing, let's just go and do this, and they give me 10,000, and they call it sebe or something, a pot of soup or something. And so Nigerians have not, just as you said, I keep saying to Nigerians, which Nigerian leader can speak on TV for 10 minutes and capture you and captivate you and say, oh my God, he's saying something? None. There's no philosophy behind what they say. Even when they read the speeches, they wasn't written by them. There's no out of their own contribution on it. So he stumbles on it, and he just reads because he's just reading to people who are just sitting down there to clap.
Yeah.
And so they've come to understand, because these politicians are a reflection of us. The only thing is they've only escaped the poverty circle. And so when they get this, I can't return to that place. So the sense of accumulation comes in, and then they sit down there. And then they don't want it to get better. I keep asking people, why do you allow housemaids to exist? Why do you allow those things to exist? Because they will serve your children. How can that be? A day will come that these people say they are tired. And we are working gradually to that day. Why do people vote? I voted this last cycle because I thought there was a difference, that maybe if we just change, I'm not saying because whoever I voted for will turn Nigeria into a Dubai, but there should be a shift in paradigm, a shift in political disposition, that people can say, hey, this man thinks, this man is thinking, but the major population has been, you get there, you get money to vote. So the motivation to vote is not innate, it is pecuniary. And so that's why we keep having the same cycle. But it is not helped by the leaders we have in various sectors. They don't want it to change. If they want it to change, they will do things that will change it. How can we every 4 years be buying new vehicles for people who come to power? The president of Zambia, was it Zambia or which country? He said, why do you need to buy me new vehicles? Are they still not working? No Nigerian leader will do it. He wants a new set. You then see them put all kinds of things in the budget that doesn't speak to the people. Do you know that I keep telling people, if anybody comes into Nigeria and say health is accessible, education accessible, even if we put the central bank in his backyard, no Nigerian will worry. But why we worry is the basic things of life that makes you different from animals don't even exist with you.
Yeah. All right. We're going to come back to you. Femi Adebayo, quickly you also share with us what your response is to the why bother question. Why bother as a Nigerian?
I think one thing, with the understanding that every democracy is based on identity. And one of the things that we need to also understand is to ask a question of what do we identify with or as Nigerians, right? When it comes to our democratic cultural practices and tenets. It's a big challenge. And for instance, we have our, when we're describing the identity, when it comes to democratic practices, then you start seeing conversations around tribe, you start seeing conversation around religion, you start seeing conversation around my people, it is us, it is our son, it is our daughter. These are the conversation. But it's not conversation of character, it's not conversation of competence, it's not conversation of credibility. And that's one of the things that make the difference. And it's also, the second part of it is the question of where do our allegiance lies, right? Where do our allegiance lies as a people? It's not even about the political leaders or the elite, because these individuals comes from among of us. They are part of the society, they are part of us. You see that in terms of Scotland circumventing the process, in terms of course, some of the acts that we call corrupt practices is entrenched in the system. If you don't do brown envelope in some places, you can get past some tables and quite a number of things. These are things that happens, among. But the truth is, where do our allegiance lies as a people? What are we looking at in terms of, for instance, is our allegiance lied to the green, white, green, to Nigeria, and not, of course, I'm from this tribe, I'm from this religion, I'm from this, and I'm from that. So I think it's high time we now start having conversations around, because democratic knowledge in the country, no doubt about it, is low. And if you look at it, that is why you see, even in terms of voting, you see that even the elites, I'm talking about the elite in the society, don't even want to go there, want to go out and vote, because Western understanding, educational knowledge does not translate to electoral knowledge. It's the same thing with democracy. We need to start having conversations. In short, most of the young people coming up today don't even understand our democratic journey. We've lost even transferring that knowledge, that understanding, what we've gone through as a people. We're not even transferring into the incoming generation. And if we continue like that, we may not even turn things around. That is one of my fears. So we need to start having conversation around democratic education. And we need to stop having civic and voter education or civic education very close to the election. At times, I tell people we're just giving people information. We're not really thoroughly educating them.
Okay,
because
kindly,
civic and voter education.
I'd like you to please kindly hold your thoughts. Let's make a quick dash to Bayelsa State, where we have a correspondent live there, and that's Bernard Akede. Bernard, good afternoon.
Good afternoon or good evening.
Fantastic. Just let us in. Yeah, good evening, Bernard. Just let us in as to how things are unwrapping where you are in Bayelsa State.
Well, I think things have completely unwrapped in most places. As you can see behind me, that's a huge primary school that had about 6 polling units. But elections or voting has completely commenced. Also, it didn't help, or depending on what side of the divide you are, it didn't help that it just rained. You can also see it's wet around me, and that happens a lot in Bayelsa. Flash rains, if you like. It rained very heavily, but for a short period of time. So the crowd that was standing there, including us, had to get out of the rain and to seek shelter. But again, it was concluded very quickly in most parts of Bayelsa here, except for the riverine areas, which I cannot exactly speak for at the moment. However, I got information of one community called Anwayi in southern Ijo local government area, where materials didn't get there on time and voting didn't commence until about 2 p.m. So as late as 4 p.m., there was a huge crowd there, and the people were beginning to get a bit disturbed and restive. But I was able to get information that voting will eventually start at about 2 p.m. And well, I'm hearing that it's concluding already. They had to rush things. How thorough they would be there now, I cannot say, because they really had to rush. Going forward as well, there was a statement that was issued by INEC. I mentioned in the earlier time I came live that there was an incident where a boat capsized early this morning, carrying INEC staff and INEC materials. Thank God we were able to get confirmation. 12 staff were involved, but there were no casualties. However, they did lose certain materials, in the water. And then in another community, one INEC staff who was waiting for a boat had been kidnapped. As at now, I put a call through to certain people and said that the lady had not been recovered just yet. And then one last one, I spoke to an observer who chose anonymity, and he said he was a bit disappointed that he feels there was still some level of voter apathy, and he was hoping that things would be better in this election. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But the last thing I tried to inquire about was vote buying. However, as you know, in Nigerian elections, that is a very dicey topic. Even if there is vote buying, people are not willing to speak about it more often than not. I haven't been able to get clear-cut answer as to whether there was or wasn't in most places that I visited. But so far, so good. This is the information I've been able to gather up until now.
Okay, Bernard, I know you talked about voter apathy, but in terms of those who came out to vote, what do you see in terms of their demographics, for instance? Do you see more of the elderly coming out to vote, or the youth, or female or male who came out, and cast their vote today?
All right, so very early, I need to understand that the elderly were given priority early in the morning, as well as pregnant women. So they did come out to vote, but from the places I visited, not exactly in such large numbers. I was quite impressed with the turnout of the youth I saw in many areas that I went to. Again, it could be because the elderly had already cast their vote and had gone, but the youth in quite large numbers. And then for women as well. Apparently in these states, I see that there's some kind of voting activity among women, and it's quite encouraging and impressive. Although, there was some kind of separation where they gave allowance for women to vote on some side and then men on the other side. But it was quite impressive. But above all, I think what really impressed me was the turnout of the youth coming out to vote. And that's because I think they have a very strong youth society. They have like youth leaders, youth secretaries in most of the communities here. So that kind of spurs them on to come out and vote eventually. And I think that's why we did see quite a large number of youth coming out to vote.
Well, Bernard, thank you so much for that live update from Bayelsa State. Please stay safe. We'll be sure to keep tabs with you on any other evolving, developments in that state.
All right, and of course, right from Bayelsa, it seems pretty calm from what it looks in Bayelsa. Kogi and Imo might, have more of the reports of skirmishes here and there, but Bayelsa seems, pretty calm, except, for the person who was allegedly kidnapped. But let's go back to Femi Adebayo, and of course, we're still speaking with you as to, what things, might engineer the voting decisions of the average Nigerian, and how maybe we should be able to fine-tune that aspect of it to enable us make better voting decisions.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know before the live update, I was trying to make a point as regards the fact that democratic education or electoral education, as its case as it is, or the case may be, one of the things that is obtainable is that it is not the way it's supposed to be. And I was trying to make a point as regards our democratic history. And I know that the guest in the studio did mention a lot around values. I, for one, I believe that there is no way you want to transfer values when it comes to intergeneration, that it doesn't come with the knowledge of history. So if you go into the curriculum of our educational system, you discover that history, some way, somehow, has been taken off. I also learned recently, except that it has been reintroduced, civic education that some of us did back then, when were re-altered or altered rather, or possibly the nomenclature was changed, so many dilution into it, and it wasn't the way it used to be. So these are some of the things that I think warrant, which is on it's understandable with all of these things why we have a lot of, when it comes to electoral decisions. And one of the things that we fail to also emphasize, maybe this goes to the civil society and of course the media, is the fact that not all Nigerians acknowledge the fact, even when they know that there is consequence for electoral decision. And which is very important, is a key message that we need to emphasize. When people know there are consequences, right, for electoral decisions, they fail to acknowledge it and come one way or the other, hold up to this. I think it's high time we start emphasizing this as part of civic education to let people understand that leadership recruitment, because everything in any given society stop on the desk of the leader. So, and if the leader is not making the right decision, not putting the people in mind when he's making policies and taking decisions, then it becomes a problem. It becomes a challenge. So I think this is very important for us to also know and put as part of our message out to the people, and giving specifics in terms of example. I cannot tell you, and I can't say that Nigerians don't know that there is consequence for any electoral decision taken. But I think it's the fact that we fail to acknowledge that, and we fail to even buttress that point and use it as a major tool to turn things around.
All right. Okay. We, of course, will continue these conversations. It's been a very, very interesting day in these 3 states.
Absolutely.
Of course, it's really just, to see how this turns out. Remember, I think Ondo and Edo State, will, of course, be coming up in 2024. We have someone joining us from Bayelsa State.
That's Bedford.
All right. Good evening. Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. I was really just saying now that Bayelsa State.
Now the same thing. I'll be even, but it's just that Bright.
Can you hold on?
Hello?
Yes, I'm not sure where the sound is coming from. But I was just saying that it seems Bayelsa, had it pretty calm and peaceful, the whole of the electoral process today. Can you confirm from your, views what the whole of today went like in Bayelsa?
All right, thank you very much. Very kudos to the INEC for proper voters education, and also collectively, as spokesman of the Ijaw Council, we did a whole lot of advocacy, to say, we are all Ijaws. This is the only homogeneous Ijaw state we have as Ijaw people. So anybody that emerges as governor is an Ijaw man first. So that's the message we took to the streets, and indeed that message has paid off, as the elections so far has been so very, very peaceful. In the history of Bayelsa State, this is, I think, one of the most peaceful elections ever conducted in Bayelsa State. I can assure you, I've been to like 3 local government areas already today, and what I saw, what I've seen so far, it has been relatively very, very peaceful.
But Bedford, there's been a speculation about an INEC official kidnapped in Bayelsa State. What do you know about that?
Yeah, of course, in Sagbama, that happened in Sagbama local government area, of course. It happened. Yeah, it was reported. I saw it on Punch, and I also verified. And it was reported through that that happened in Sagbama. But of course, elections, when it comes to violence and all of that, this is one of the most peaceful. I think that is just 1 out of 100. We don't really know what really happened there. Maybe the INEC official was careless or something. We don't really can't put our hands to what has happened. But so far so good. It has been relatively peaceful.
I mean, but do you know if he has been released?
That I've not gotten any clear information on that, but I'm sure it will be released, of course.
Okay. Let's take a moment, to speak to our in-studio guest. I'm talking about Dr. Adediji. Now, it's a mixed bag of different, fruits. Dr. Adediji, in hindsight for INEC, what are the lessons going forward when conducting subsequent elections?
Thank you. I'd like to start from where Mr. Adebola ended. I think you also asked the question about what motivates people to vote.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things we need to begin to think about in this, de-emphasize some pedestrian considerations. In a form that I want to get the driver's license, why do you need my local government? Why do you need my religious orientation?
Yeah, but is it maybe because that's all we have?
No.
Because if we've not been able to, if we've not found candidates that can communicate effectively value that will come from them being in office. Listen, politicians are politicians, regardless of how well they or how sweet they talk. And it's not just in Nigeria, even outside the country, in the West, in the United States and Europe. Politics. But we seem to have it even worse off here, because we don't even have the institutions or ways to checkmate these, politicians in any way. This is what I'm asking. So have we simply found ourselves reduced to having, our judgment clouded by tribe and religion and local government and all of that, simply because we've not been able to find a politician that's able to communicate value, actual value, to us as the electorate?
Maybe in a sense, but the other danger to this is this. We wait for cycles of election to make impact. You cannot come in 2026 and be talking to me about there must be a basis of where to start from. And then we don't start, now I think it's that, but I can't remember who said it about education. The thing is, the education of the people as to what to expect is so pedestrian that they don't have a means of knowing until 1 month to election. Then that's when they even know the local government is campaigning. That's when they know the senator that is campaigning. We don't know them. So everybody just votes because, okay, he comes from my area, he speaks this language. And also the politician, just as you said, if he just finds someone, but I know the person may not win in the next cycle, but let him create a situation people begin to understand where he stands and what he stands for. It may not, I mean, he doesn't have to have money. I mean, maybe if I just use this, let me use Peter Obi, for instance. He hasn't won, but he has created a difference in terms of personality of persons who can come. Can he build on that? Will he build on that? And so that subsequently, will people begin to have an understanding of somebody who has a dream and who can take us to a different place? That is what we don't have. They're too short-circuited. He comes and then he doesn't win. He goes to the next party who has won, and then becomes a bandwagon of a gravy train. So that's the challenge. But for me, I think we need to go back to Ways panel reform report. Will somebody have the guts to say, can we study this thing? Even if we need to say out of 10, we take 5, and then we advance the reason why they need to work. If we don't do that, we will just be in the same cycle and then be talking about and then coming early. And then by the time it's 2027, honestly, it will become a situation that people now take it as a ritual. Do I need to go and vote? So look at this year. Out of about maybe 200 million Nigerians, I don't know how many people were registered. Only about 60 million people voted, even less than that. 8 for Tinubu, and then, okay, let's say about 30 million in a country of 200. And that is representative of our democratic values. We need to change that. If we're not careful, the next election, only about 20 will vote, 20 million. And it will be people that have been motivated by pecuniary things. They take one bag of rice, take this, and then people run after it because it is what they can get for the moment. I know it's complicated. It's not something we can get, but I agree that I think the voter education should begin now. Whoever wants to make a change, people, and let people begin to do that now, and then let people see a difference. And let there be someone who can talk, not just talk, but who has a philosophy. From the question that I gather from you, what is you say this is an American, this is what an American stands, this is what an Israeli stands. What does a Nigerian stand for? What is, you can say these are the benefits of a Nigerian that they can claim that as a Nigerian, this is what I benefit. Maybe it's because the amorphous nature of that definition is what is leading us in this conundrum. That we're just moving and waiting for something. And also Nigerians have come to a situation of believing the magical. Oh, an angel will just come and change Nigeria. It will never happen. Oh, let us pray the more. It will never happen. If South Africa was still praying, they will still be under apartheid. We must take our lives and our destiny in our hands and begin to define. Even as us, many elites, look at the way we voted. It is because it comes from my area. It is because of this. You cannot have consequences because you take the man to court. These people come with Ashwebi and say, he's a man now. He comes from my area. And they begin to. So justice is stalled. We must begin to change this the definition.
But before then, let's just do a quick recap on these off-cycle elections, talking about elections happening in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa State. We have the top contenders, APC, Usman Ododo. We have PDP, Dino Melai. We have Adejo Okeme of the Labour Party. We have Murtala Ajaka of SDP. And also looking at Bayelsa State, we have Diri Duoye of PDP. We have Timipriye Silva of APC, Eradiri of Labour Party there. And then coming down to Imo State, we have the incumbent governor himself, Hope Uzodimma of the APC. We have Samuel Anyonwu of PDP, and then Achono Nneji of Labour Party. All right, let's connect with Bradford to get his perspective on the issue on ground. Okay, then let's move to Femi to get his thoughts.
I don't know if the connection is strong enough. Okay.
Okay, he can hear us.
Okay. Mr. Adebola, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, so there's obviously so much that needs to be done. It's really just going to be 200 million people hoping that we continue to improve on the process. Doesn't seem very likely that it will in the next long while. Maybe except the Tinubu administration has its own specific plans to improve on that process. But in the meantime, I want us to also look at, what really could, improve on the quality of persons that we have running for election. I'm going to use Bayelsa State, for example. We have current Governor Adediji, who, of course, has been there for the last 4 years. Timipre Silva is coming back, after, of course, being governor between 2008 and 2012, or 2007 and 2012. We have Udeng's Eradiri, who, of course, who is running. But, the people who are described as the two major contenders are, the current governor and then the former governor. It doesn't feel like anything is changing for Bayelsa, in the next 4 years. If either of these two people win, is basically bringing back the same routine for the next 4 years. And I'm using that as an example of, we don't seem to be moving forward. We don't seem to be moving forward as a nation with the quality of people that we put in leadership positions. It feels like it's a circle. And, after Adediji leaves, he likely would go to the Senate. What can we do if we need to fix that aspect of it? I know everyone's going to talk about money, how expensive it is to run elections in the country, and some of all of that. Forms were sold for 100 million in the last elections. It's a complete mess. But Mr. Adebola, I want you to speak on that. But I want, since Bedford is currently in Bayelsa, let's have him speak on the thoughts of Bayelsa people on the candidates, Adediji, Timipre Silva, and Eradiri Udengs.
All right. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
All right. Okay. Basically, those are the three major candidates we have in Bayelsa State. I went to Eradiri's Eradiri's where he casted his vote, at Budama Ekwitiama in Yenagwa local government, and you could see that he has love. He's a young man. He's a young politician that is trying to change the narrative in Bayelsa State. Like I said earlier, they are all Bayelsans. They are all job people. So anybody that emerges is the governor of Bayelsa State. But this kudos for us as youths, as young people in Bayelsa State, that one of us is stepping, throwing his hat on the ring, to change the narrative in Bayelsa State. But for what I've seen so far, there's a whole lot of vote buying. The incumbent governor, he is a peaceful man. He has brought relative peace in Bayelsa State. Then the APC candidate, when he was Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he has attracted a whole lot of developmental projects to Bayelsa. So they are all qualified to be governors of Bayelsa State. But the issue here is the issue of vote buying is quite crazy. We went moving around the state. We saw how people were collecting 40,000 naira, as much as 40,000 naira, 10,000 naira, 12,000 naira, as it may be, just to vote, and it's quite crazy. That is one of the major problems that we are faced with, in the Nigerian context when it comes to electioneering. And I think the INEC needs to do so much more. We all have that collective responsibility, to disabuse the mind of vote. Of voters' apathy and vote buying, which is a critical virus that is eating deep into our politics. It's quite unfortunate. It has come to a point where if you don't have the money bags, you can't contest an election, and it is quite very, very, very unfortunate for us as a nation. And we hope that in the next 30 years, this narrative will change. And I want to, as spokesman of the Joint Council, my advice is more young persons, should vie for positions, should contest, challenge these big wigs, and I believe the narrative can change in the nearest future.
Well, 30 years is quite a while, away. Mr. Adebayo, Mr. Adebayo, kindly go ahead.
Hello. Okay. All right. Thank you. So such a beautiful aspect of this conversation, right, for me, because if you look at it's not just about the three states. Generally, in the electoral, the electoral process in the country, it seems like we're just recycling. Don't forget, if we are going through the profile of every individual in the state, only for selected few. But if you look at even the PDP candidate in Kogi State, you're talking about Senator Dino Melaye, who was once a legislator, for so many assemblies, come back, being a contestant, a candidate rather, in these elections. If you look at the issue of Bayelsa that you mentioned. But for me, without not just going over the profile of these individuals over and over again, one of the things that matters is we're seeing the effect of some of the things we've been discussing, right? If you have an average Nigerian, especially those, I use this, careful in choosing my words, in terms of those that are educated and those that are learned, right? People that are, because I classify young people especially to two. We have the builders and we have the burners, right? And if you look at the builders, you see most of them, when you ask about politics, when you ask about governance, when you ask about the process of elections, they're not just interested because of the cliche or possibly the way politics have been branded in the country. And it is popularly said it's a dirty game. So people don't want to be associated with it in that regards, and we leave it for people that doesn't even have proper understanding, that could easily be induced, that could easily be manipulated in terms of the understanding of things around. They don't even understand what is happening in that jurisdiction to be able to draw comparison and pattern. People that possibly in terms of economic power and strength, they are not there yet. So it's easy for such political class to actually induce them, manipulate them. So that is the effect of some of the things we've been talking about since, that it's also discouraging people to participate in the process. So this leads me to the conversation around increasing youth participation and, of course, representation. I, for a person, and of course, with my understanding and the work that we do in KDI, we know that young persons are participating in the process quite a lot of in so many ways. For instance, I know that close to a certain number, a huge number of ad hoc officers that will be deployed for this election, most of them will be young people that will be sourced from the NYSC, the Youth Corps Service, the National Youth Corps Service, or Corps Service, yeah. You look at people that are mobilizers in terms of civic and voter education pre-election phase. Most of them will be young persons. And if you look at even people that are election observers, just like myself, we are young people. So young persons are participating. But the major problem, just as we also have for women, when it comes to women participation, is the aspect of representation. So when it comes to that leadership, holding leadership position, having to have young people as candidates, it becomes a problem. So we have young persons participating informally, but when it comes to the formal process, it becomes a problem. A lot of things are skewed against them. The system are skewed against the young people. Even the people that are there in terms of structured mentorship is not in place. So you even have people that are not learning the ropes. From where I come from, we have an adage that talks about when you are doing a ritual and you are not allowing young persons to be part of the process, then that dies automatically. So these are some of the things. However, you also have to ask conversation of what the young people want to also learn, all right? Yeah. These are some of the questions. But however, it's also very important. Not all politicians are bad. There are good ones that also have good intentions. So it's also important that young people learn from these individuals. It's also important that the space is open for young individuals to participate in the process. Look at it. Violence is a major problem also, apart from even the types of maybe the system is skewed against young people. Violence, I've seen a lot of, negative, how do I put it, stereotyping, negative stereotyping is young people. Oh, it is young persons that perpetrate violence. It is young persons that do this. No, young persons are doing amazing things when it comes to even developing the country and quite a number of things. But when it comes to even amplifying all of those things, we don't give young persons a chance to do all of this. So I think for me, basically, one of the things that are very important if we want to move forward as a people is that we need to start making some of these things. And it starts from the generation we have now. It starts from the generation we have now. It's not even just about governance. It also has to do a lot with the value system in the country. So all of these things need to be in place. Otherwise, we will come back in a couple of years and we'll be having this conversation. Yeah. It will not be as better as what we envisage.
All right. All right. We of course, well, hopefully that's not the case. But, if we don't also take those important steps now, that just might be the case. But let's take a short break. When we come back, we will continue here, of course, on the Ballot Nigeria.